questions here. So we're looking at the first thing is that we get that window closed actually. In terms of preceding Ramadan, we've got the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where it says Sha'ban is a month that lies between Rajab and Ramadan, of whose virtue people are heedless, they're forgetful of. In this month the servant's deeds are taken up to the Lord of the world, so I wish to have my deeds taken whilst I'm fasting. So I spoke about this in the talk on 15th of Sha'ban, is that one of the most important things Allah teaches about Ramadan is to maximise on preparation beforehand. And this is really important for these fasts, these long fasts now. People have to, you'll find that if you've had a bit of practice of fasting in the up and coming months, you find it a lot easier. And so I recommend people get a few fasts in beforehand, and so that they're prepared. And the Prophet ﷺ highlighted this. In one hadith, it's quite weak, he says that we fast Sha'ban out of veneration for Ramadan. And so the concept here is that it's in preparation for Ramadan, and many people are heedless of this because in the old days the Arabs were conscious of the significance of Rajab being a sacred month even before Islam, and so they would generally perform Umrah in that month. And then obviously when Islam came, they were conscious of Ramadan being sacred, and so they neglected Sha'ban. And so Sha'ban is seen as a preparatory, if that's the right word, month for Ramadan. But then we've got sort of a contrasting hadith. If you look at the other hadith in the third slide there, I better get these. So that was the first one. The second one, where the Prophet ﷺ, in the hadith by Bukhari, it says, do not precede the month of Ramadan by fasting 1 or 2 days unless it coincides with a fast one does so regularly. So the scholars sort of wrestled with this hadith. How do we understand this? And so he said basically the way they sort of conjoined between these hadith about the Prophet ﷺ didn't fast any other month more outside of Ramadan than his Sha'ban, but then he's prohibiting people from fasting after the 15th. That's specific for people who it might tire them out. So if they were they're quite of a weak disposition. So if you start getting like eager for Ramadan, you say I'm going to do extra fast Sha'ban, and then by the time you get to Ramadan, you're completely worn out. And so that's the prohibition. Then there's a second prohibition in Sha'ban the Prophet ﷺ speaks about. I'm not sure if it's on the slides. Look at it there. No. Where he says don't fast 2 days before Ramadan. That prohibition is only because of people fasting it with the intention of being precautionary, that it could be Ramadan. The Prophet ﷺ didn't want people to do those sorts of things where you're, oh well, I'm not sure if it came in or it hasn't come in yet, so I'll fast the day before, or 2 days before, or 1 day before, in order to be out of precaution. And so if you have that intention, I think it's makruh tahriman. It's like highly disliked for you to fast it. If you're fasting the days before Ramadan because you usually fast Monday or Thursday or something like that, or that's your intention for the merit of Thursday or Monday, it's not a problem whatsoever. Okay, so these are the two issues that are to do with Sha'ban. Some scholars actually had the position, the Shafi'is had this position that, to the best of my knowledge, it's disliked for them to fast any of those 15 days beforehand. Whilst the other scholars say no, there's a reason behind that. Then it doesn't weaken you for when you actually get into Ramadan. So it's someone who's like basically trains for a marathon, and he's pushed himself so hard that on the day he can't even perform properly. But if you have the intention to fast these days in Sha'ban in order to prepare yourself, then that's actually meritorious, because it means that you're more likely in those first days where people feel the headache, the burn when they're coming in the first few days. You're not going to feel that because you're already prepared for it. And so, yeah, go on.
Could you just repeat the first reason?
So there's two reasons why there's two prohibitions. There's the last 15 days of Sha'ban. So some of the scholars saw that as disliked to fast those, and the reason behind that was why?
I get the second one in terms of not for it to be a precautionary thing.
Yeah. And what was the one about the prohibition for fasting?
That was because your body don't get weak and you should be ready for Ramadan.
So say you've got those last 15 days, you fast and put your loads of effort in, and then you burn yourself out, so when you get to Ramadan you're exhausted. Okay, so that's more like someone who's got a weak disposition, their health's not so great and so forth. Those people have to be mindful of that and cautious. As for someone who, you know, has the intention, sometimes that's better. As I said, in most cases it's better to do that, but not too many. So I generally recommend people just do Monday and Thursday or so forth, and just to get themselves trained up for it. And then the other prohibition we said was the last 2 days, because what's the dislike? Why is it disliked to fast those last 2 days?
If people are doing it as a precautionary.
Yeah, if they're with the intention of being precautionary, it could be the day of Ramadan or not. Okay, because the issue here is because you have to fast with certainty. Okay, so I'm going to do this because it might be this. That's not a resolute intention then, so it's not even valid from that perspective. And so,
for example, if Ramadan is falling on Friday and it's Thursday,
yeah.
So
It'd be I personally, this is just my own personal opinion,
yeah.
I won't fast that last day regardless. Okay,
Right.
but if someone chooses to do so, so I sort of take into account that hadith and do, but if someone should know, I've got into the routine of my Thursdays, I want to fast my Thursdays, I'm going to do it. There's no reprehension, there's nothing blameworthy in that whatsoever. An issue came up even with the 15th of Sha'ban, was that people say, well, it's on Friday, I've got to fast 2 days. Because there's a prohibition of fasting, isolating Friday alone. But that's only if you select Friday to fast, you should fast another day. If Friday, it falls on a Friday, a certain meritorious day to fast, it's not a problem whatsoever. Okay, because your intention is not to fast Friday, your intention is to fast that day, and you would have fasted on whatever day it came in. So these are just some issues people get that sometimes they're a little bit confused about. Does that clarify that?